So, welcome everyone. My name is Gail Robertson, and I'm a recovering journalist. So, part of the 12-step program is make amends, and part of making amends is that I now work in marketing and manufacturing. But prior to that, I had a few other amends-making worlds that I was in. And Jake, you asked about my 3-step process and where that came from. Well, in a previous life, I ran a bed and breakfast. And part of the marketing plan for that was to come up with some promotions. And this was before I had left the world of journalism and decided to go run a bed and breakfast. I thought I was going to run away to an island and life would change, which it did. I often credit that time in my life as my MBA time. And I came up with a new tagline, which was my name of my bed and breakfast was Twin Oaks, and it was Twin Oaks, home of Gail's famous homemade biscuits. Now, the reason why this was important and what I'm going to be talking about today is that aspect of telling and sharing your story. And sometimes we're afraid to step into our own power and step into those things that we do well. Now, my biscuits were not perfect. The biscuits actually were, flour, buttermilk, some shortening, but that's not why people started talking about my biscuits. And this ties into manufacturing because people aren't looking to buy the actual steel product or the actual automation. They're interested in the story. So my biscuit story was really a moment for me where I learned that it is the power of story. And one thing that happened, and today I want to get to sort of some 3 steps where I can help share the power of the how you can next share that story. So with my biscuit story, I wrote a little article for anybody that's ever done anything. And, when you've traveled in tourism, you pick up those tourism books and there's a little paragraph about a business and a company. So I wrote this little blurb. Well, fast forward, I had someone called to book into my bed and breakfast. So this young man was coming with his fiance, wanted a special weekend. And then when he found out I was Gail, he said, "Are you Gail?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, You're the famous Gail. You make these famous biscuits." And he went on. And he goes, "I read about you." And I'm like, "You read about me?" And I'm like, "Tell me more. Someone did a story on me that I didn't know about." So as I asked him questions, where did he see that story? I wrote the story, and it was in the tourism booklet. That was the beginning of my real marketing journey when I realized I had control of the story. I had control of how I was going to be branded. Now, at the time, talking about imposter syndrome, my mom had made these biscuits. So they had the story of the biscuit was really that when people came to the bed and breakfast, they sat around the table and it brought back memories. It brought back memories of family and of home and a sense of security. So and everybody loved these biscuits. Now, I thought the biscuits weren't that great because they weren't like my mom's. They weren't as puffy, but people loved them. Now, over the years, my biscuits were improved, but it really wasn't about that. It was about that sense. It brought people back to a sense of what they remembered from childhood. And the reason why this is important is that this is what we need to do more of in manufacturing. We need to ask people, what is their biscuit story? What is it that they can share? And it's not, again, it wasn't about, no one was caring about the flour and the shortening and the buttermilk. Very key to use the right buttermilk. Anybody wants tips on how to make biscuits, I can share that later. But it was about the story. And that's how people started knowing about my bed and breakfast. And I can tell you there was many stories when I was out, and this was on an island too. So really challenging when you run a bed and breakfast on an island. So Peely Island, and I would be out and about, and when people found out, first thing they asked about was, "Are you Gail of Gail's famous homemade biscuits?" So that was a tagline that really worked and stuck.
I'm really wanting your biscuits.
Okay, well, actually, you know what? For a sidebar story on this, when I go now with a new client, I actually have a little bag, and I make some biscuits. I put them in. I have my sticker, and I can them in, and I say, "Here, Jake." And they look at me very strangely because I'm coming in to talk about manufacturing. I give them my biscuits, and I'll say, "We'll get to that." So I do a little talk, and then I tell the biscuit story. And that is the connection back to how they need to share their story in manufacturing. Then they're going to eat those biscuits. They're going to remember GailNow, and they remember the power of telling a story. So let's fast forward now to, as I said when I started off, this all comes from me tapping into something called transferable skills. So we all have these skills from our past, from our current, and we need to use those to a great degree. Now, I've had a few different careers, and today, and what I'm doing when I came here is that this is all very meta for me because I'm in a bit of a transition of going back to those roots of journalism and my curious minds story. And I'm really fascinated because I've been sitting back really listening and observing and about how each of you have these fascinating stories, these backstories. Jake, you said something about, you know, when you're going out to speak, often, like, we think we have to have these I climbed Mount Everest stories. We don't. I love hearing about Mount Everest stories, but I'm like, well, that's never going to relate to me. I'm never going to climb Mount Everest. It's not in my world. But you know what does relate to me is when I'm hearing about stories last night that we were sharing, that I can understand about where people came from, their story with their children, the struggles they went through, those everyday struggles, that's your biscuit story. So when you start sharing your biscuit type stories, that's what people can relate to. There's lots of speakers and stories about Mount Everest, but what people will probably walk away and remember is those personal stories that you share that you can then connect back to the work that is happening. So part of when I was in journalism school and graduating, our last year, we also had these shirts made. And it was out to change the world on deadline. I have been, over the last year in particular, really thinking about this and realizing that we all have the power to change the world. We are all that grain of sand, and it takes many grains of sand to make a sandcastle. And we sometimes forget that. We think, well, I'm just this little one person. But when we can all come together like we're doing here, this is where the power is. This is when we can start building sandcastles. Now that sandcastle story, full credit to a former boss of mine. His foundation was called Grain of Sand Foundation. I remembered that story, and I always thought about, we have to remember our grain of sand is important for the sandcastle. So let's get into now, I want to go to something practical of that everybody can use based on where I want to go, I know, with not only my Curious Mind show, but how important it is to both tell and share your story. And when people often ask what I do, my son's always asking me, he says, Mom, I don't even know what you do. And I think it's because I have this diversity and so many interests, but really telling and sharing a story is what I really love helping people do. So the first thing we need to look at is who is it that we want to reach out to? So when we're looking at media, let's just throw out some ideas of what are some media publications that you read in the trade publications. Is there any trade publications people? What? What is it?
The Fabricator.
The Fabricator, okay.
Modern Machine Shop.
Modern Machine Shop, yep. I have mold making technology. That was one with Christina.
Industrial heating.
Okay, so there's lots of, when we think about all these different media publications, and Jake, I know I keep referring to Jake, but he's the, I kind of see you as the king here, you know, the kingpin. But the idea of now starting to put those into a spreadsheet. So I have a media list. You can do that too. You create your media list and you keep adding to it. So there's different types of media. So there is trade publications, which we all know, but that becomes, we are almost in that like a silo, right? We know it's the manufacturing world. There's also mainstream media. So I would encourage each of you to think about what is some mainstream media you could reach out to, and also community papers. And we often forget about these, but local publications, small publications, they are hungry for content. And mainly you just need to put the content in the right format and the right approach. And we'll get to that in terms of the how. But first of all, you develop the who. So you look at all the media, social media, podcasts, YouTube posts. So think big picture in terms of who do you want to reach out to. Some of you are probably already doing that in terms of, you know, reaching out to get on podcasts, but think about YouTube shows. Think about people that may want to even do a story. Even if they're not interviewing you, they may want to take some of your content and share it and use it and hopefully give you credit. Then the what. Okay, so what do you do next once you have this list? Now this is where you can use LinkedIn, where you start reaching out to people at these magazines. So editors, photographers, anybody that's on staff, start making contacts with them, develop a rapport, start sharing their information. When you do that, you will get on their radar. That's what happened, I know, with myself, Christina Fugis. I started connecting with her on Twitter, and we've now developed this relationship. She's invited me on a marketing show. I'm now at the PT Expo. So it all started with the relationship. We all know how to do that. Now you need to carry that over to the media publications. And even get in touch with the salespeople, get in touch with anybody around that, go to LinkedIn, you all know how to do that, and basically just start building relationships and rapport and develop those contacts with them. And share their content. They will love that. Because if you go on their pages and start commenting, they'll start to notice you.
Yeah, like I would say that's the most massive missed opportunity is engaging with people on content. Like it being meaningful, being like meaningful about it. I think that's like when you and I talked. The 5-5-5.
Yep.
5 comments a day is like the most powerful thing that you can do.
And
it's almost more powerful than you creating your own content. Is engaging with other people's content.
Yeah. When I'm working with new clients, I often tell them, forget about doing your own content. I tell them, take that off the table. First, start just by going engaging on other people's pages, because that's easier sometimes people to do. Just start with a like, then a comment, and then share something, right? I just did a post today, and instead of just sharing Chris's post, but I credited you, right? So I did a LinkedIn post, copied and pasted, said Chris wrote this on his page. So there's lots of cheater things you can do when you're sharing. Then the how. So once you know you have your list, you have the people you want to reach out to, then you start building these rapport and relationships. So now you're ready soon to start maybe sending them a news release. Now, I will tell you, this is something I've talked to a few people. Jeff and I talked about this as well. Most people really struggle with how to do the news release. The main thing in a news release is you don't want to say we're having an open house or we have a new product. So we talked about this stories today, right? So you want to start to share a story. One of my clients was doing a trade show in Germany. This was a couple of years ago. And I was trying to think about how can we find a way to get on the radar. We're one little Canadian company in a sea of thousands of other people attending. And I was talking to one of the organizers, and they said, and it was Cavalier Tool, is the only Canadian company. And I'm like, only Canadian company. So what I did was I built that into the news release. But part of the trade show, when we were developing the trade show, they said, if we're the only Canadian, what's the most Canadian thing we can think about?
Maple syrup.
Yes. Hockey.
Polar bears.
Yeah. And beer. We actually did beer.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, yes.
Sorry.
Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry.
So we did a whole trade show. We did, A, baby. I'm going to use that. So we created a whole trade show that looked like a hockey rink. We did the floor like a hockey rink. We did rink boards, and we created promotional rink boards within the rink boards. So we made them look like the different, and we took messaging and we built it around the idea of hockey. And so I had to do search for, we had maple candies, and we also had some, it was a famous beer.
Maple candies with you?
I didn't. Oh, damn. I couldn't bring anything across the border. I was like, so we created this whole concept around hockey, Canada, and we had, I think it was Moose. Was it Moosehead? Anyways, it was a beer we had. But here's the other thing, and it's funny. You know what they say? The devil's in the details. For sure. Twist off cats in Germany. That was like kid in a candy store. All these people were like, cool, and they were all talking about these twist off cats. And here's the other thing about sending out that news release saying we're the only Canadian, we have a hockey theme. And I didn't talk much about we talked about Cavalier builds molds, but then we got the best thing ever. And the thing with when you send out news releases and you get attention from the media is often you can't buy this. You're not buying an ad, you're getting attention from them. It's not even for sale. They said, hey, we're interviewing 3 companies before the opening of the show. Could Cavalier be one of them? Bingo. here was this little company, the only Canadian company, they wanted a story, and everybody was congregating around the booth because all around them were booths with plastic parts.
Do you have any photos of that?
Yes, yeah.
And like that's really like lines up with like I did a podcast with industrial marketing on like how to create a unique booth. Even when your product's boring, your story can be unique. And like that right there.
Even when your product's boring, your story can be unique. That's a perfect line. Hold on to that. Write that down. Write that down for a minute, because I'm gonna, before we end, I'm gonna ask you to do something for me as well. So I'm at my time. So those are the three things we want to remember: the who, the what, and the how. So the who is reaching out to media, finding them. The what is reaching out, and then the how is the media release. And this is something I know Jeff and I, because of this, and this is about being curious and innovation, being innovative. We're actually talking about looking into doing video news releases, because I don't know really who does that. So this is in incubation stage. We're talking about it and looking at how to make that maybe as something as a takeaway from this event. And that I've been doing this, and it's kind of one of those things like, and Jeff has been asking me some questions about it, and we're going to explore this, because we don't know, like, how do you do it? Well, I'm sure people around at Netflix and all these other, Uber were saying the same thing. But no one's doing that, right? So,
video resumes.
Right.
Yeah.
Pitches. I mean, yeah.
So the last thing, so what I'd like everybody to do is take, if I can, 30 seconds to a minute, write down a quote on your phone, if you have a phone, and I want you to email me a quote, because what I want to do and I want to talk to Jake and Chris about this after, is to do basically a media release after this event. And I've already started one. I had the mafia, because I looked up mafia and what it all meant, but now we're changing the name, but we'll still weave in some mafioso kind of lingo without saying mafia. What I'd like each of you to do is send me a quote. So if you can just write something down there. What's that?
Can we do it on LinkedIn, or does it have to be through email?
Can we DM you?
Can we do it on LinkedIn, or does it have to be through email?
You know what? I don't care. Whatever's easiest for you. Because as long as I get it in digital format, I don't care. I'm not going to I just send it to me. So I just want a quote of, tell me, there was two things. Let me find my questions. Where did I put them? Why is having a manufacturing group like this important? And what is it that we need to do to make change in manufacturing? And this is sort of taking probably some of the questions that were asked on video earlier, is just repurposing them and put them in a written format and send that.
What do we need to change to manufacturing?
Yes. What do we need to? How do we need to make change to get manufacturing more in the spotlight? And if you have anything else, because often when I'm interviewing people, I have to say, or is there anything else, so the goal, so often I start with the goal of this media release is to get attention and to say, just no one else is doing what we're doing. So what is your part? What is your grain of sand part that you want to do to see manufacturing champs rule the world? Big, hairy, audacious goal.
Sounds good.
Okay. Now I know we're running out of time, but if anybody has questions, or if you want to talk to me later, we can ask questions later. Does anybody have any burning questions now? Or
Share your biscuit recipe.
share? Okay, I will share the biscuit recipe. But one thing I will say about the biscuit, it's all about the process of making, because I can give you the recipe, but I have to explain the process of how to make them. Yeah.